Okay, well, the recording didn't get the first part, so I'll just go over it quickly again. The reason you do cuttings is to create more plants that are the same as the mother plant. You won't get any surprises in color, shape, or form because it's an exact duplicate of the mother plant. With seeds, you may have an issue if you're saving seeds if it's a plant that's been cross-pollinated by something else, and you will not necessarily know that you're going to get the color you want next year. So that's one reason we do plant cuttings. Some plants want to be cut at different times of the year, but we don't have that option. For the greenhouse, we need to cut them in the fall. And what we're going to start with, oh, there's my plastic bag. What we're going to start with are coleus. And the first thing you need to know to do a cutting is where to cut. And you're going to make sure you have a sharp bypass pruners. The pruners that have blades that meet together crush stem. You don't want to use that, especially for this purpose. Now, okay, this is my very artistic interpretation of a stem. You have a stem with branches coming off. This one, they're not alternate. Alternate would be every other, and they wouldn't be on the same side. Now, these little things, both on the main stem and on the branches, are called nodes. And those nodes have instructions from the top of the plant saying, you stay nodes. I'm not going to be in competition with you for anything. So I want to go straight up. And this is also important when you're cutting things in the garden. If you cut the top off, and it happens when people top trees, all the nodes suddenly say, hey man, we're free. And they break out, and these all will set out branches. But these are dormant nodes. And these will also send out branches. Sometimes when you have had something in water for a while, you'll see little white nodes. And that's where the root is starting. So these are undifferentiated. In other words, they haven't decided whether they're going to be branches or they're going to be roots. But once you put them in water or into potting medium, they decide, ooh, roots. Also, they don't have this telling them not to grow. The apical tip is gone and all of its chemicals are gone with it. Okay, so back to here. You can see to a certain extent the structure on this. The stems are coming out at the same place that the new leaves are. And later on down the road, the new leaves will die back because they just cut themselves off because the stems take everything over. So what you want to do is find a node like that where you know that you can get some roots coming out, and you're going to clip it right below the node. Now, if you're wanting to keep the plant looking neat and tight, you'll take this saw. Now, when you're doing cutting, this is actually considered a different type of cutting because it never had an apical. It doesn't have the apical tip on it anymore. This one won't either because this is one of the most important things you can do. And why? What we want to do is instruct the plant to put out roots, not flowers. And so I'm going to actually cut it down to here. And I'm going to take off all the big leaves. And frankly, with the coleus, if you actually broke that off and stuck it on top of the soil, you'd get a new plant. Coleus is extremely easy to root, extremely easy to root. So anyway, we're going to take these guys off. And with coleus, I do not use root hormone. I don't use anything. I just stick it into the soil. Stick it into the soil like that. What we're doing today, we're going to do it in corners. being propped up by chopsticks. And that's going to create a nice little greenhouse. Now, when I go on to something like the plectranthus, it's the same type of mechanical work. You're going to look for a good cutting. You're going to cut right below the node. Actually, I can probably get a second cutting out of this one, this little branch. So I'm going to cut down as close as I can to the stem. Cut the leaves and the flower. I hate cutting the flowers. I love these. And this plant is just beautifully grown and very happy. So you're going to go right to where the flower is. And you're going to cut it off in each spot. Now, this is going to be interesting because this has two, has a split branch. In other words, there's just not a single apical tip on it. The next thing you do, and if you decide the leaves are too big and they're going to take too much moisture from the plant, you can cut the leaves in half. To leave some leaves on. This one, I will use some Cormex powder. Now, what I normally do, oh, I don't have it out here right now, just put a little into a separate cup because you cannot reuse it and it's expensive. So you have enough in there so that it's up on the side. Kara, can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
How it's up on the side so they
Yes.
can see how to put the stem in. Yep. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to put that stem in and you're going to kind of wiggle it around in that section. So you're not, now normally I would have a spray gun or whatever, and I would spray it so that it was wet, so it stuck a little bit better. Now, unlike the coleus, you want to put a hole for this. So you're going to use, again, our handy dandy little chopsticks and make a hole so that you don't scrape all the hormone off the plant. And then you'll just put that in and form it around.
What is the name of the purple?
I think it's a purple plectranthus.
Okay.
That's from Yim's mother plant.
Mhm.
So this, again, there you go. This is from a mother plant and it's absolutely gorgeous. And this is what we can get after it's been growing on for a little while. So
That was rooted in May.
that's just summer growth. Then we have geraniums. And geraniums are kind of a different beast because geraniums are actually succulents. And I'm going to cut that off to that bottom leaf. There's a wonderful growth tip on it. And I'm going to cut off all the leaves. But I am not going to put this in potting soil. This has to stay out and callus overnight because it's a succulent. And there are people in the club who've been able to grow them in water. And I don't know what that method is exactly. So with this, I'm going to take a pair of scissors because the leaves are big, and plants transpire at night. They give off gases and they give off moisture. One good reason to have them around, they also clean the air. And that's what I'm going to do. Now this will wait for 24 hours before it's put into the soil. Okay. This is great. This is a scented geranium, which is really lovely. We'd love to have those. And so this will wait outside. But if you look, Kara, can you kind of hold that so they can see where those little node kind of things are? If people are interested, I'd like to do a class on botany for gardeners down the road. Well, I've never rooted them in water. We've had more luck actually using rock wool cubes that you can get on Amazon, and you just stick them in the rock wool cubes. I have to look into that because I don't know its environmental impact. That's like the floral designers are now running into the environmental impact of floral foam. Only 25% of it is biodegradable. So I have to look into whether the rock wool is suitable or not. They actually use that down at the Greenwich Botanical Center in their greenhouse. They use rocky wool strips.
Do you use rooting hormone when you do put the geranium in?
We've done it both ways, and it doesn't seem to have made any difference.
What's the purpose of drying it out overnight?
To prevent it from rotting, you're forming a callus at the base, so it's not drawing up too much water. And I've got a whole bag, as a matter of fact, that I got from a member up at Meadow Ridge in the car that we'll have to pot up today or tomorrow. But that's why you do it that way. You know,
Jerry, what was that blue plant that you used before the geranium?
before the geranium was a plectranthus that was propagated in the greenhouse from a plant that Yim brought in, and it was cut and started in May. It's a great plant because it has two color leaves and the flowers contrast with the lower color of the leaf. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, was telling the species, what is it? The
Mona lavender, I think,
Mona lavender, okay.
the one I got.
So that's a variety called Mona lavender, and had you had it outside and a different variety as well, you could come up with something completely different if it creates seeds. You'll find, as a matter of fact, I was really sad. I bought this absolutely gorgeous climbing black-eyed Susan, only it's pink with flowers that are bigger than a silver dollar, and it doesn't make seeds because it's a hybrid. And when you find those kinds of hybrids, of course, cuttings are your only resource. You can't do anything else. So there are a lot of reasons to do it. It's fun, it's gratifying. I mean, I know people grow on avocados. I've never been able to do that one. But, you know, it's just gratifying to have something in the house that's growing, that's alive, that you've created. Especially if you have too many kids in the house and you need something you can control. So anyway, now the way in which we're going to keep this in a controlled environment, there are several ways to do this. And one thing I want to actually, I'm personally going to try this year. I have several roses, and I'm going to try and do roses. But so you're going to put sticks in like this, and you'll have a better probably.
potting soil has not been moistened. There's nothing else. The potting soil has not been moistened.
Yeah, no, I'm just doing this as a demonstration.
It should be moistened, should it not?
Yes, it should be. The potting soil should be moistened. And for potting soil, good question. What do you want to use for potting soil? The best thing is to use something that will retain some moisture but doesn't get soggy. The soil that we've got today is what we use normally for cactus because it's a fairly fast draining. It's called high porosity. And you can see how that makes your own little greenhouse. Now, when I do my roses, because I want to keep them separately, I'm going to save all my soda bottles. I'll have my pot. I'll cut the top off and I'll stick it over my rose. And that, my rose cutting, and that way I will have a nice little greenhouse for the rose cutting to grow. Other uses for this, and the only reason I saved it actually before now, if you put a little water into the bottom, just down in little bumps, and you use an X-Acto knife and you cut little lines, you can stick the leaves of succulents in it, and they will sense the water at the bottom and send out leaves down toward it. It's a great way to propagate a ton, an absolute ton of succulent cuttings. And I mean, succulents are fairly expensive when you want to do something like a succulent wreath or a succulent ball. It can be quite expensive to do that. The wreath forms alone can be upwards of $50, the ones that hold the most soil. So this is a great way to propagate and create new succulents. Then another way to take care of them Okay, so say I have 6 with 4 plants in each one. That's 24 plants. I actually could do more. Now, you would put the lid down of this upside down. You would put this over and snap it into the lid. And you've got a controlled environment. The plants will be very happy in there. I learned this up at Broken Arrow, where we went to a wonderful propagation lecture where we could pick any branches we wanted. My son, for some reason, chose hops. I don't know. But that's a very easy way and a very compact way to store your cuttings. But you do have to check occasionally to make sure it's still moist or not. One thing that Janer, who's park chair, wanted me to make sure that you knew is that bring your plants in before you turn the heat on and the house becomes hot and dry, because they're going to sulk anyway. So you want to bring them in to the most comfortable environment that you possibly can. Any questions? You kind of don't peek too often. You should leave it on for at least 4 weeks. And after that, you can check, but very gently see if there's resistance to the plant coming up. Because you don't want to tear those new leaves. And the whole myth about water roots, you don't want to tear the roots. The whole thing about water roots, they're no different from regular roots. You just put them into potting soil and the plant grows. You don't have to do the mix it with sand, the mix it with whatever other things that you may come up with on the internet. All you have to do is plant it in a regular soil and take care of it. Make sure it stays moist and make sure it stays, make sure it stays out of drafts and things in the beginning. After that, once it's nice and big, you want to make sure that there is a little bit of a breeze around it, because what that does is it makes the plant stronger. If a plant actually, when you have seedlings, the best thing to do is brush them, because that forces the stem to become stronger because it thinks it's a wind. And that way you don't get these leggy, limp seedlings. With your hand.
Or a fan, you can have a fan on
You
it.
can have a fan on them as well.
Gives them more tensile strength in the stem because it's flexible.
Natural environment.
What about woody plants?
Woody plants, Jackie's asking.
Woody plants, depends. It depends particularly on the woody plants. Plants that are woody have hardwood, softwood, and then new wood at the tip. So most of them prefer the softwood cutting, not the tip cutting because it's too soft, but the softwood cutting. And you can tell because the hardwood cutting will break when you bend it. The softwood will bend, and then the other is just so green that it'll snap right off. So you want to use the softwood to do the cuttings with.
Maybe we can do a workshop later on that.
Well, yeah, I'd like to do another workshop, and people should let me know if they want to see it. One workshop would be on, as I said, botanical Latin. No, that's another one I want to do is botanical Latin, botany for gardeners. And there are so many other ways in which you can take cuttings. There are heel cuttings, there are hammer cuttings, there, and
Maybe grafting, maybe.
no, I'm not getting into grafting. I've never done that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to try, I can't remember the name of it. It's where you cut off the exterior bark on a branch and you put sphagnum moss around it and then wrap that in plastic. And then it roots out that way while the plant is still living. And then you cut it out below. I have a red maple I want to try that with because they're notoriously difficult to propagate. So that's one way you can do that. Some of those things really quick. Like if you did it with a magnolia, it might come very quickly because magnolias can layer. If there's a branch on the ground, a magnolia can layer. Anything that can layer is going to actually propagate more quickly like that. And you want to use a stronger hormone.
For instance, with a rose, you would take the softer wood and you would put it in the root zone to
Mhm.
begin.
And you would cut off the flower and leave maybe one leaf on it, because you want all that energy to go toward making roots. That's the most important thing. And that's what the plant's going to do. It wants to survive. So anything it can,
You need to cut the leaf.
you can leave one leaf on, one or two, but no more than that. It stresses the plant too much, especially something like a rose. You know, if it's something simpler and you've left a couple of leaves on, it's not going to be as bad, like particularly like a geranium, because of course, being a succulent, it doesn't need as much water. That's one of the most common causes for problems with succulents is with all succulents, but with these guys in particular, is overwatering. Now on this one, on this geranium, have I got it in the right place, Jerre? This is the new growth. This is the softwood, and that's the hardwood. You can see 3 distinct zones. Any more questions?
Is when you wrap the stems of the woody stems, is that the same as air layering, or is air layering something different?
That's what I want to do with my red maple is air layering. Thank you. I couldn't remember the name, but that's when you cut a circle top and bottom around the outer bark, leaving the inner bark intact so that the branch will still be getting nutrition and stuff. Nowadays, they have little globes that you can buy on Amazon even. And they open, you put the sphagnum moss in, you snap it around. And, you know, then because the globes allow the roots to peer out a little bit, normally you'd have air layering, and that's why they don't come out in long distances. And that's when you'd know that you could cut below it and take the globe off and plant it up.
What time of year do you do that?
Girl, Linda, you always get me. It will happen fastest in the spring, but you can do it any time of the year. And again, you're doing this on hardwood too, so it's fairly slow. Now, when you're asking these questions, this is one of the books. This is the first book on propagation I got, and it tells you, don't bother with it. It's not going to work. Grow it from seed. This is the way you do it. It fits in the group with these other plants. And this is a very good book. There's actually a better one out called Making Plants, and it's written by Ken Drews. And he's very familiar to a lot of people in Wilton because he's actually done a lot of photographs for his book in Sandy Blaze's garden for one of his books. But this Making New Plants is fantastic because he shows you how to use things you find at Lowe's to make a misting system. And he goes through the whole thing, and then he tells you about various plants and when it's best to do cuttings, when it's best to try and stick them for the best results. And it's absolutely fantastic. Now, there's one other little thing that you can do. There's some plants, particularly trailing plants, and you've looked at them and said, what are those white things sticking out from that root node? Well, those are leaves because those plants layer. So what you can do with those is take a flat, shallow container, put soil in it, and put those down on it. And then they will send roots out at the root axils, and then you'll just cut and have a bunch of little plants. That's what we do here in the potting bench, so you know what it is that we get up here. Things like begonias we do up here, and they are really great. You know, some things we've had problems with, and some things like verbena we don't bring into the greenhouse ever because that is just like it generates whiteflies. But yeah.
Want the ladies to do a little potting up themselves?
You guys want to do some potting up? Do you ladies want to watch while we pot things up, or shall we end now?
We'll watch you.
lawyers.
Are you-
Linda,
are you
I don't know.
Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, because
Jerry?
it's probably gonna be on YouTube.
Stars.
Just show the box. Yes. And that can actually go. So, let's see. Well, it's good in water because actually the water thing in a clear jar. The only thing is you don't want it in the sun if it's in a clear jar. 'Cause you don't want the sun getting at the roots. Roots never see the light of day.
Yes, of course.
So,
Oh, that's a good point.
What is that?
begonia,
It's
isn't it
begonia.
gorgeous? Okay, so where do we want to start?
Oh, this one.
So you don't have to. do that.
This is not Ecolius, right?
No, it's irricine.
I know it's irricine, but I didn't know whether.
They're not in the same family.
No, okay.
And just so everybody knows, I've had 3 shots. So,
What's that?
Can you hang up? Or do you want to come closer?
And that is the kind of cutter that you mentioned?
well, yes, this is a bypass cutter. You see how the sharp blade goes past? And we have had sharpening classes here, and I bought lots of sharpeners and things for people. We take orders before the class, and there's another person who does it. That's Liz Keister's husband does a great class as well. He's taught me some things I don't know, but that's a bypass pruner, and it makes a much cleaner cut. The other one, this blade would meet this, and it crushes the stem. So you want healthy stems.
And it's a good idea to disinfect between plants when you cut.
Well, some people do. Some people don't. Some
Good
people are
idea.
too,
I think
it's a
so.
good idea
Yeah.
to dip them in alcohol,
Or bleach.
in between, or bleach,
Look at this.
or
stem.
peroxide. So on this, let's look at this. You may do the cuttings on it. The cutting. So where do you think we want to cut? That's exactly right.
On a
Could you
bias
move
or
your
not?
hair?
It doesn't make any
Could you
difference. I would actually,
Just so that I
Your
could
hand-
see.
your hand is in the way.
we want to do it straight because we don't want extraneous material in the water.
Mhm.
So this,
So now what are you going to do?
I take the lower ones off.
Yeah,
Do I have to cut them or can I pull them?
well, you can cut them.
It's cleaner to cut.
You don't want to leave anything jagged for pathogens to get into.
And the same for the.
Yeah.
And I couldn't it do just that?
When they're that little, you can. And you're going to keep going up, taking all of them off up to the last 2 at the time. And it hurts people to do this.
Oh, yeah.
I have
Okay.
enough trouble cutting back my baskets so they'll have more flowers. So I did one and didn't do the other. And my husband said, why do they look so different? Okay, so now on this one, you see how big those leaves are?
Cut them in half.
Cut them in half, but use the scissors because that's too small. So like that.
That hurts too.
I know. And then you would put this in, we have little containers here.
Oh, for the inside. But never 700 over here.
Yeah, I guess there's not that much left though.
Oh.
Dip it on its side and roll it around and then use a chopstick. We need to put soil in the.
If you have a more porous type of soil or want to make it, would you just add some sand to it? So it's not so.
This is very,
No, I would not add
Yes.
sand. You can add vermiculite, you can add perlite. I have bags of chicken grit that I get up at Agway. because the chickens eat it for their digestion, but it lightens the soil. I mean, there are other things you can use, but they're not easy to find. If you go up to the big agway, you can get dry stall. These are all things you also use in a hypertufa mix to make it really.
So this I can just stick in.
Yep, just stick it in. Make sure, and then push the, I would put it in, turn it so that these are not going outside the pot so that you can put a cover over it
Oh, of course.
without bumping into them.
Oh, all right. So now
she
I
could put a
put
couple in
sever
there,
and
couldn't
then
she, if you had room?
tent it.
I don't have plastic bags for
I have
everybody.
them at home.
You know, I'm like, no plastic bags in my house. I have 9 million glass dishes and they still use plastic bags. But
You use the bag so that you get vegetables in and like, it's just a little flimsy one.
yeah, just a
It doesn't have to be something that's.
I use net ones or have my produce loose. I make them crazy at the foliage market. They go rolling down. Okay, so Gladys, do you want to do yours next? Or
I brought these because I brought this for cuttings if you want them.
okay, well then if you don't want to do it, we can do some after. You know, if you don't want to make some more cuttings to take home, we can do this after the video.
Lots of soil.
Okay, now geranium. Okay, so I already cut your geranium, so you're gonna cut my geranium. I thought this geranium was dead. You can see this is all it was, but it decided to send out a new shoot. You can see where the fork is, and so it sent out a whole new shoot that became a nice flower. This is from the greenhouse from last year, or 2 years ago. Now, again, you can see on this, can you see, Kara? This is the new wood, and this is old wood. Sorry, yeah, this is old wood, this is softwood, and this is the new growth. You can see the different colors and everything. So, okay, where do you want to cut first?
So would this be considered too short?
Well, a little bit, because what you want, this is only about 1/2 inch long. The rest of it is stem, so you want something a little longer than that.
So then I would figure
Mhm.
in here.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Station.
So they
You can
make
perforate
it, they do a visual, they do visual damage, but they don't do structural damage. That
When I see them,
you
should I
want all
spray
of
something?
you don't want anything.
When I see those little inchworms, should I spray something?
I don't spray much, and with inchworms, I just
Just
ignore
remove
them.
them.
Really?
Yeah, just remove them by hand. I
And
mean, next year I may be mad enough at the Japanese beetles to spray them.
and would I take off these guys as well?
Mhm.
And what about these here too? Because they look like they might.
No,
be-
that's the tip.
That's okay.
If you look at it carefully, you can see that's the growth tip. So you definitely don't want to take that off.
Okay. That
So
being the growth tip, would I take the?
Can you
bigger
bring that
guys?
closer to show the tip
Sure.
or the where to?
That's a growth tip from a branch, and it has this almost, not quite the same powers as an apical tip at the top of a plant. It still will not necessarily send out nodes or anything unless this is gone. And when you have roses or other things that bloom on this, and you cut the rose off, that's why your rose then sends out new branches.
Apical.
Apical, ATICAL. Apical.
Do roses grow seed?
Well, I had to have, but
Not with me. I've tried so many things.
No, I mean, some people do their rose cuttings in potatoes, and that actually works. You stick a hole in the potato and you stick the rose cuttings in, and that works.
Why is that? Antibacterial?
I
Properties?
think, but I'm not sure. But I mean, it's a controlled environment. It's potato actually has lots of potassium in it, maybe, but it has lots of the things that feed the root. It's difficult in dry soil, so these have to be,
More saturated.
yeah.
Do you need to spray the plants before you take the cuttings,
For winter protection. Bugs.
before you bring it inside?
Yes, you can do that.
Close them off with a hose first and then.
Yes, you can hose them off with a hose. That'll get rid of aphids. It'll get rid of some of the, if you have mealy bugs. But if you have the plants, they will come. Just like build the field and they will come. It's amazing how you can be meticulous in your conservatory or greenhouse and you're still going to end up. My big problem is ground scale, the hard scale. It gets all over my orchids. So, and it got all over. I stopped growing clivia because of it. Clivias are fun to grow from seed because the seed you put on top of the soil and it sticks out a root that then goes down into the soil. It gives you resistance to pull out. You're going to take a spoon, or if you have a small trowel, and take the plant out and just put the whole thing into a pot.
With root.
Not
Not disturbing the roots.
without disturbing the roots as much. One thing that's always been said is you handle plants by their leaves because they can regrow a leaf. But if you handle particularly a seedling and you take it out of the seedling container by the stem, it doesn't grow a new stem, so that's gone. So you try and do things in the least disruptive way possible, and that's why using a spoon helps. And you may actually get new growth around along the stem.
Why don't we explain when we take greenhouse cuttings, what we're gonna do as far as fumigating them and using horticultural oil and this protocol there, because there's
Okay.
the same sprayers there.
Okay, our protocol in the greenhouse for any plants that we took in the past. There we go. Okay. For every plant that we took in from the past, we use this. It's suff oil. Now you can use neem, you can use suff oil, you can use dormant oil, any kind of oil. You can use insecticidal soap as well. And in doing that, if it doesn't have oil in it, you're killing, you can then do the oil. So you're killing everything that you're bringing in. But the problem that we found in the greenhouse was that no matter what we did and we sprayed, waited a couple of hours, sprayed again before we took them in. And the issue is we still have bugs. As I said, it's a difficult thing to maintain an absolutely immaculate greenhouse. But what I think is that they come in, a lot of them come in the soil. There are eggs in the soil. And one year before COVID, the year before COVID, I said, next year, what we should do is rinse off all the roots, not bring any of the soil in, but that's just too time consuming.
Bare root.
Yeah. So, you'd bring them in your pots, we'd take them out, we'd rinse the roots off out here, outside, not allowing them in the greenhouse, and then take them into the greenhouse after they've been rinsed and sprayed twice. But interestingly enough, I was watching a video on dahlias the other day because I'm very interested. I grow mine from seed. I grow mostly the bishop's children, and my husband just loves the dark leaves and the salmon colored flowers. And I love the differences that you get with that. And that's not something that will tell you what color it is, because bishop's children are mixed seeds and you're going to get all different colors with bishop's children. And they're really easy to germinate and grow. But I was watching my favorite guy, Monty Don, on Gardener's World from the BBC. And he went and he visited a top dahlia grower in the US, in the UK. And what he does not submit dahlias grown from his tubers. He takes the first growth of from the tuber and then roots it. And that's a new plant. And that's the one he uses because he said that it's more vigorous than things that are coming up from the roots or the tubers. I haven't tried that yet, but it's fascinating to think of that way. And, you know, one thing I'd like to also do is we all have Bucera because it's a great native plant and it's great in shape. You can divide that using different methods, cutting into the crown and create a bunch of new plants. And that's really easy and it makes it, because they grow up sometimes on a stalk and they look pretty ugly. So that's another class I would do if people wanted. But, you know, we've only covered the basic form here, the initial type of cutting, just cuttings and starting them in water or in soil. But there's so much else that you can do.
What about the protocol for people bringing us cuttings? What should we tell them as far as time?
People who are bringing in cuttings should let us know when they're coming. We will be sending out a schedule of hours in the next week. I'm actually not going to be around from the 19th to the 26th. I may be back before that, but I'm not sure. And I may have a helper in the greenhouse with me after that for a couple of days. But you should bring them in when we're here so that we can spray them with our Suff oil and make sure that there are no eggs or anything on them. And we'd love you to bring them in just as cuttings. You know, just drop a wet paper towel around the bottom and then bring them in.
And label them.
Yeah, and label them. If you know the name, please label them. It's like you did with your teacher when you were a little kid. You used to take flowers and, you know, you pick the daffodils and wrap them in paper towels and then put the foil around the. We would like you to bring in the cuttings. What we'll essentially do with the early cuttings is turn them into mother plants. Get them to grow as quickly as possible because with the heat bench being warm, the warmth in some cases helps the plants develop their roots more quickly. Well, I think that's about it. Thank you all for watching and I'll see you next time and maybe with a surprise.